Hello and welcome to Turning Point Tactics, the competitive Kill Team 40k podcast and YouTube channel, focused on giving you the strategies and tactics to seize initiative every turning point. I'm your host Ryan, and I'm here to give you the tips and tricks to elevate every part of your Kill Team experience. If you enjoy this content and you want more, you can join our Patreon for as little as £3 a month. We'll get access to our Discord, patron priority questions, early access to videos including Kill Team bat reps, faction guides, and much more. If that's not for you, you can support just by hitting like, subscribe, and sharing these videos amongst the community of Kill Team enthusiasts local to you. Finally, if you're looking to buy some new miniatures or paints, you can buy them through Element Games, getting a 15% discount, and if you use our affiliate link below, you'll support the show as well. With all that said, let's get into it. Okay, so there's been a new balanced data slate. Everyone wants to know what's hot, what's not. Everyone wants to see a tier list, right? So this week we're going to go through the tier list that I think is representative of the competitive meta, and understand this is all about teams being played at their very best. This isn't a casual Thursday night thing. This is a tournament match. Top tier players playing against each other. Which teams are going to be very successful? Which teams aren't? That being said, a lot of people do want to know, about Compendium. I'm not going to dwell on Compendium because I think it's, the game isn't balanced around it. So, it's kind of a pointless thing. So what I've done is I've just thrown up a tier list for Compendium, what I think's good, what I think is meh, and what I think is bad, right? So you can have a look at that, and you can play with Compendium as much as you want, but I'm not going to go into any more detail on that. So the first tier that we need to look at is a double hello tier. So maybe you're a fan of double pleasantries. Maybe you like to, reject the meta and embrace pleasantries instead, whatever it's going to be. You're not searching for the win. You're searching for the enjoyment, and you want some challenge, right? So if that's the kind of player that you are, you would probably pick a team from the double hello tier. So these are teams that I think actively need a buff. So they're not quite strong enough to consistently compete at the higher levels. And the way this works is the team on the right side is the weakest and the team on the left side is the strongest, and that's the way I've tried to sequence all of these going forward. So let's start with that then. So the team number one is going to be the Halfkin Salvages. Now, I was debating this as bottom place with some of the others, but I think it's going to go to them. And the reason that I think this is the case is they're just not quite there yet. And I was talking to one of the guys at the club. He's a really good player. He's been playing this team for a while, and he talks about just how massive that +1 inch movement has been for them. So that they've gone from being basically unplayable to now being playable. But you are reliant on your opponent making a mistake, and you have to play a sort of a perfect game, which over the course of 4 tournament games is just rough. If you miss position slightly, you're probably going to get punished and all that sort of stuff as well. So how do you fix this team? Right? So what buff do they need? I think the common one that's thrown out there is +1 wound, which would help in the sense that they wouldn't be injured as much. So you would still be moving at 5 inches, which might solve their problem. But it also might just make them really durable versus shooting teams, because they all have 3-up saves. So suddenly they become really skewed against elites. Like Intercession would hate playing against this team. So it's a pretty fine balance. And I was wondering if actually it's more of their reliability that's the issue, because they have to get within 6 inches to be able to increase their ballistic skill. They have access to rerolls, but it's a telegraph. It's like, I'm going to have a reroll here, and there's a way for you to remove it. And the grudge tokens, you have to roll a hit first, right? So if you're only rolling 2 hits, the fact that they've got 3 grudge tokens is completely irrelevant. So I'm wondering if, rather than give them the +1 wound, which you could do, if maybe that tweak to the grudge tokens where you effectively make it into the Inquisition Mystic. So you make a miss into a hit or a hit into a crit for each grudge token. That would just increase their reliability, make them a little bit more killy, a little bit more scary. And then potentially their game plan would be, we're not going to move out and score 4 points on turn 1 because they just don't have the movement potential to do so. But actually it's going to be, instead, we're going to try and get 4 points on turn 4 or turn 3 and turn 4 instead. And that could be the way to do it. And the other option I sort of thought about when trying to fix this team is, with the Ancestors are watching, if it was a free shoot, a free fight, or a free mission action, that might just mean that they can play the objective a little bit better, because effectively all it is they're just struggling to get the range and the movement to get onto the objectives and score, and that might just let you do it where you need it potentially there. So that's kind of my thoughts on that team. Next, we're into Crute. So the reason Crute is so low is because they have some really, really horrible matchups. And I know people are saying, "Oh yeah, but Crute are fine into your Tau, your Blooded, your Vet Guard, and that sort of stuff." And you're right, they are into those teams that they perform fine. But if you try and play Crute into Colts, you play Crute into Beastmen, you play Crute into Exaction Squad, you can play Crute into Intercession or Legionary. It's just rough, right? So, like, those teams just dismantle Crute. I don't really think that there's much of a way that Crute can get around that. So, how Crute going to be fixed? I think they need access to some tools to really deal with the elites. So maybe their AP one shots become not limited and that kind of thing. But I know that would have a skew against some other teams. But like, they also just need those Colts and Beastmen to be toned down, because at the moment they're a melee horde that if they go into another melee horde, basically auto lose, which is really, really rough for them. So I think that's kind of where I'm at with them. They will be better when the rest of the meta is sort of like evened out a little bit. But for now, they're going to sit down at the bottom, because if you run into a competent elites player, you run into those top tier teams, it's just rough. Next on the list is going to be the Wormblade. And so Wormblade are in an interesting place because I think they're okay on open board. Like they have all the right tricks and they have the right abilities, but they're inherently linked to these sort of like key cult agent models that do most of the lifting. So actually, when it comes to like threats in the team, there's not that many. And if you're quite efficient at dismantling those threats, suddenly the team kind of falls apart. And the issue is on, like, say, Into the Dark, is those key models that they don't get as much utility because they can't move around the board so freely. So they sort of get locked into these channels, and it's very easy for them to either be, to reduce what they can do in a very limited area, or to be trapped in that area and killed quite efficiently. And then suddenly the team sort of falls apart. So I would like to see some elements of, an Into the Dark buff for this team. I think that's probably where they're weakest. So I actually have an interesting idea of how to buff Wormblade. And this might sound mental, but I think you just take away the restriction on how many cult agents they can take. So, like, that really, I think, fits the flavor of the team, and it lets them have more of those sort of killy models that need to do stuff. It lets them have more 3 APL models to be able to work in ITD. It means that their Seek and Destroy tack ups are easier to score because they could potentially have 2 very good melee operatives for Rob and Ransack or for Rout and that sort of thing, and they'd be more survivable. I understand that that sounds really powerful on paper. I think maybe it is. Maybe just increase it to a maximum of 3 initially, but it is a trade-off, right? They are losing 2 of their neophytes to be able to get one of the cult agents, and I just think it thematically works really well, and it make the team much more fun. Now, maybe that makes them too powerful. Maybe they would skyrocket as a result, but just like giving them access to 3 cult agents rather than 2. I think it could be really interesting. I'd love to see how that plays out. Okay, so next up, we got Warp Coven. So they're an interesting place. I think they're now the right level of durability and the right level of killiness. I just think that maybe I still think it's their tack ops. So I just think playing security with this team is really rough because you can't move too fast because all is dust, which I do get. I understand why thematically that exists and that sort of stuff, which is fine. So if you're playing with the rubrics, that then gives you the killing and defensive profile that you need, but then you're not going to score your attack ops very well. And then if you play with the Zangors, you get the movement and you get the attack ops that you need, but you then lose your offensive reliability. And like Zangors at the moment into any of the sort of top teams, your Colts, your Beastmen, etc. That sounds pretty horrendous. If you run Zangors into Exaction Squad, like 8 wounds, you're just going to get popped. So I feel like Rubrics is the answer. And I feel like it's their issue with attack ops. And maybe just removing the caveat of, how many Zangors you need for recon or whatever. Or if there is a Zangor operative in your kill team, you can have recon. If there is a Rubric operative in your kill team, you can have security. Because then you could take 2 Zangors and run 5 rubrics. I think that'd be a nice balance. You'd be 7 activations, you'd be elite, it would work. So That's kind of what I'm thinking. I want to get these guys out on the table because I feel that they have so many tricks and tips and stuff, but they're all linked into these sorcerers, and those sorcerers are like the only ways for you to be able to get up the board quickly and score objectives. They're the only way to, kill your opponent reliably, and they're also now trying to do everything else with tac ops and all that sort of stuff, and they just get maxed out. And as soon as you start losing sorcerers, the team falls apart really quickly. So that's kind of where I'm at with this team. The other option, of course, is you just make them unnecessarily durable and just give them all +1 wound for the rubrics and the sorcerers, and they can just sit in the middle of the board slowly trying to get security tac ops. But I think that'd be a bit boring personally. So I'd rather see those other fixes tried rather than that. Okay, so we're now into the C tier. This is the standard tier. It's your beginning of the competitive. These teams are all fine, right? So they play the game fine. You can win absolutely fine with them with a 50% win rate, all that sort of stuff. But maybe there's an element which they're missing, or they have some rough matchups, but it's all winnable, but not too bad. So we're going to start with the Corsairs, and I love my Corsairs, right? They are by far one of the most fun teams to play. Probably one of the best looking teams, I think, as well, from an aesthetic point of view, in how much like each model just like looks really good if you like that aesthetic. But, and this I've said this before, so I'm just repeating myself, it's their reliability. Everyone knows that this team has the highs and lows of a roller coaster. When you're rolling hot, you're gonna feel amazing. You're gonna do so much. But just everything about the team is just so swingy that it becomes quite painful. So that's kind of like my thoughts on them. And I think as well, a lot of their strength of the early game, being able to play aggressively, score points on things like loot, etc. That's now sort of come away from them, because now everyone can play for the late games. Even if you run ahead and you really make a big rush on turns 1 and 2 in an attempt to win the game early, there's a chance you're going to get tabled and you're going to lose the game on turns 3 and turn 4 effectively. So, that's kind of my thoughts on Corsairs. And that also runs basically into Hand of the Archon, where I feel they have a bit more reliability, that they have methods of getting it, but they're very much like a momentum team. So it feels to me like if you're doing well with a team, it rewards you, right? You get more power from pain, you get more of these rerolls, all that sort of stuff, etc., and suddenly you can really run away with the game. But if you don't get the momentum going, it hurts. Like, it really hurts. So, for instance, the other day, I played a game where effectively I was running our BTs versus these guys, and I managed to score a kill at the end of turning point 1, and then win initiative and score another 2 kills. And that just it just guts the team, because they're immediately so far behind, and they're trying to kill models that have already activated, and you then just start this trading war, and you don't win, right? Because you kill someone, you get your token, and then effectively someone just kills you and you lose it, and that's what they find so tough. So I think they're fine, and a good player can definitely do well with them. Like, don't take that, don't get me wrong on this, but at the same time, it's that reliability. It's can you get the early kills to get the momentum that you need to get you into the right place. And then let's move on to the next team that I think suffers with reliability, and that's going to be Phobos, right? So Phobos are a great team because of their tricks, right? So massive toolbox, loads that they can do, but there's just an element of how many 1s and 2s are you going to roll, right? And it's going to be a lot, and they just don't have ways to really make up for that. So you can do bolter discipline and to be able to shoot twice to try and get the volume through if you need to, but you're spending CP for that. And then you also, if you're playing against elite teams, you probably want that P1, so you're spending CP for that. Maybe you're running Reavers and you want to fight twice, you're spending CP for that. You want to be able to do your free mission actions. You want to be able to get your extra moves, so you're spending CP for that. And suddenly, you have a very explosive 2 turns with all your ploys, working, and then suddenly you're out of CP and it falls apart. So if you haven't got done what you need to get done on turning point 2 and turning point 3, then you're done, right? You're out of the game, because another elite team will just body you. And that's kind of where I feel they're at. And they have some pretty rough matchups in the meta, in the sense that with the melee teams are very, very efficient. They can just directly contest them on those objectives. And also with Inquisition, with the amount of AP that they can bring, that's also really rough as well. So they're a good team, and again, Hans is a good player. You can go far with them, but I just feel like if you're in a 6-round tournament, there's going to be like a game where your dice just don't work, and there's nothing really that you can do to solve that. So yeah. On the flip side, let's roll into Novitiates. This is a team where the dice will work for you pretty much most of the time, because you have so many ways of getting reliability and dice manipulation, all that sort of stuff. The downside is their matchups currently. So they are a great team against a lot of the meta. However, I think versus Exaction Squad with their shotguns, Inquisition with Exaction Squad attached, against Beastmen and against Chaos Cults, they just really struggle into those matchups. So I think that's going to be a lot of the team. Like a lot of the people they play are going to be those key teams when you get to those like round 2, 3, and 4 in a tournament, or whatever. And having just 10 models like hurts them as a result. So they're on the knife's edge, right? Because if you buff them in any way, I can see them skyrocketing straight away. And I feel like they are so close to being too strong and so close to being bad. Like, for instance, if you give them an extra operative, I think that massively buffs them, and it's wild how much of a difference that would make to them. So I'm not really too sure if they're exactly like if they're perfect where they are right now, and maybe they are. Maybe just like that's the point, is they are good into most of the field, but they have some bad matchups, and maybe that's the perfect place for them to be. Because if you tone down those bad matchups, then effectively the rest of them all come in. Next, then it's going to be the Kazakin. So the Kazakin, again, I actually quite like them. I think they're a really fun team. They've got a lot of tricks, but one of the weird things about them is all of their ploys have so many caveats. I actually think that like they could just remove all of their like caveats to their ploys, and this would be like an A-tier team, right? So like reposition, if you just got rid of there being enemies within 3 inches as a caveat, just get rid of that. The clearance sweep, if you just get rid of the fact that you have to have your own model within 2 as well, or 4 without as well, whatever, just get rid of that. These sorts of things, right? Like the relentless requiring your opponent to be on not ready and engage and not in cover, like so many different weird little caveats you have to like string together to be able to get this ploy to work. And it's like Vetguard just laugh because they get it effectively so much easier. Like that's my kind of point, right? It's like, can you just remove those silly caveats from this team and then just let them have their ploys and let them be meaningful? Because a lot of players just save their CP for CP rerolls, which is a bit of a shame really with this team, because they're a really like good looking team and they're a really fun team to play. And I've got some amazing looking Kazakin models. Thanks again to @Joshua for painting up in a way that just looks so good. So yeah, they're a fun team. I feel like with those 4-ups, I've done it so many times where I've just rolled absolutely terribly and the relentless ploy doesn't work because against a mid-range or a horde team, you just don't have that punch. But against elites, they're fantastic. If anything, they're too strong versus elites. So that's kind of my point, is like, can you just tweak it so they're good against the mid-range and the hordes as well? Okay, into our BTs. Now, this is one where I'm struggling to place them because I really need to play more of the elite matchups. And I've played them into mid-range, I've played them into horde, and I've played them as part of Inquisition. And I feel like they've got everything they need, which is going to sound weird, but like they have a lot of abilities now to potentially deal with most of the meta. And they're really good into your mid-range, they're really good into your hordes. And shotguns can do a lot of clearance work going through. The subductors are pretty durable, and I was playing again the other day, and I was thinking, actually, just tar pitting objectives and doorways and stuff with a subductor now that they're 8 wounds makes it really hard for anything less than a dedicated melee operative to deal with, and even then they get to fight first. So if you roll slightly hot on your subductor rolls, then suddenly they're not getting through and it's a wasted activation. So yeah, they're a good team. I'm wondering if they're actually B tier or actually A tier. I've put them at the top of C for now because I feel like there's still some matchups where they will struggle, particularly like Legionary. I think could be a really tough matchup for them. I think Necrons as well could be pretty hard. So those sorts of teams I think would be pretty good into these dudes, and obviously not excluding the guys at the top of the meta as well. But so at the end of the day, I really like them. I'm going to watch this team a little bit more cautiously. I'm going to try and play some more matchups into the elite teams and see how much that P1 actually gets out there and does stuff. And if it's pretty meaningful and pretty impactful, then against those teams, maybe it's going to work well from there going forward. So we'll have to wait and see. So lots of interest in this team at the moment. Okay, into the B tier. So these are above average. These are the guys that have something that's going to help you potentially get an advantage in a game, but they're not going to be anything too wild. So let's start with the weakest of B tier is Hierotech Circles. So there is a caveat in this, all right, which is they're not particularly reliable, and they have some difficult matchups at the top. But they also kind of have the tools to deal with those matchups. So I'm debating these guys being the bottom of B tier or top of C tier. But I put them here for now. So against like the melee teams that are out there, they have the ability to slow everyone down, which is really, really useful. I know a lot of people are sort of saying, against Inquisition, they're going to turn off your reanimation protocols. Like, yeah, sure. But like also, I think you just have to play that matchup as if you don't have them, right? So like it and that sounds horrible, but you can give your team a 3-up invulnerable save and a 4-up invulnerable save, and Inquisition don't have like reliable AP. All of it like is hitting on 4s with maybe 1 reroll. They might roll hot, sure, but at least then you've got your saves. So in that instance, I think you just have to play that matchup like you are a standard elite team. And just try and see what you can do, which I know is probably a pretty rough thing to say to someone, but that's what it is. And then, like if you can just like really slow down the movement of those melee teams and just try and do some ball control and get the points, then away you go. But I acknowledge that those are not good matchups for them. But they have better matchups into most of the other fields. So that's kind of like where I see them sitting at the moment. But, if someone wants to say to me that they're C tier because of those matchups, I wouldn't disagree, But I feel like they're there or thereabouts. Reliability would be nice. And I also think that maybe just playing them with more Immortals is kind of the way to go. Like I know the Apprentech gives access to more Cryptech actions, and you can shoot through them with your other guy and get some ceaseless and whatever else, or sort of cult ambush. But I just feel like you just need more killing potential, and running like against Horde teams, 5 Immortals with blades, and then a lethal 5 hitting on 4s, 3-4 damage. That works pretty well. And against mid-range, you have the Gorse weapons with 4-5 damage AP1, which works pretty well. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts. But I can see an argument both ways for this team. Okay. The Intercession Squad, my poor Black Templars, the boys in blue, everyone would call them. I think these guys now are, I think they're B tier. I was again. There's another team I'm tempted to put into C tier, but they now have one play style, which is fine. I think that is their most competitive play style, is to go effectively full shooty, which is okay. The problem is that I think that they're gonna struggle a lot. Like. And we'll get into this when we get to the higher tiers of the game. I didn't really understand why this was the problem child, if that made sense. Like, if the answer is that this team is difficult to play against as a new player, then there's so many other teams that need addressing as well. So let's go with that. So if they were slightly too oppressive to play against for new players and that sort of stuff in your local meta, fine. Like, I think you'll just see people running rapid and durable, and it will be pretty much the same. I think at the higher level play, people were running methodical because that was better for your setting up Overwatch and Wrath of Vengeance shots and that sort of stuff. But now people are just going to have to budget effectively for And They Shall Know No Fear, which is fine, but you've just taken a whole bunch of killing power out of the team. So the whole CP budgeting for them is very different now. So just something to be aware of. But I also think this now means that you don't have the CP to like ever change chapter tactics at the start. Not I'd recommend that you do, but like if you do that, going down to 6 CP for the rest of the game is just rough. Like particularly when you need to budget for doctrines, you need to budget for And They Shall Know No Fear, and you need to budget for probably some shoot and death or fight in the turning point. So that's where I think they sit now. Into Legionary. So Legionary are your staple choice of, they have so much flex in amongst their kill team. They can really do a lot with what they have. And I think they're now in a better place than Intercession. So I know that matchup is routinely fought out and people sort of play it both ways, but I think they have the ability to, for instance, take on Beastmen better than anyone else, really, with their, with the Slanesh plays that we've talked about previously. I think Nurgle is your go-to for the rest of the matchup. And I know they have some pretty rough matchups in versus Kazakin and Inquisition, that sort of stuff. Like their matchup versus Inquisition is disgusting. And that needs to be addressed. But for the rest of the game, I actually think that they're still okay. They haven't lost a lot of their main key strengths. They just have some weird matchups that have arrived at the top of the meta, which makes it really hard for them to play against. So sitting at B tier, but I think these guys play better than Intercession now. Top of B tier then is going to be Blooded. I really like this team is a lot of fun to play. All right, so if you've ever played Blooded or even played against Blooded, they're fun to play, right? Because the whole mechanic of I want to try and kill people and I want to die as as efficiently as possible is just fun, right? So if you're playing against a whole bunch of guys that just run at you and want to die and want to blow up and want to kill stuff, that's an enjoyable play style. And they have loads of good ways of doing it. And I think the melee reliability that they can get from adding Relentless to multiple models is really nice. The -1 attack is really nice. Seek and Destroy is in a great place now. So overall, they're in a pretty good place, and I can see them doing well. The only downside is when you start playing against top opponents, they know how to focus on those blooded tokens, right? So, and if they play it well, they're going to try and stop you from ever getting Gaze of the Gods, or at least not getting Gaze of the Gods until turning point 3, where the game could be decided, right? So, that's kind of where I think they're not quite at the A tier yet, but I think they're in a good place where they are, and you can do absolutely fine with them. Okay, into A tier then. There's a lot going on here. Let's start with Pathfinders. So, please remember, I'm talking about this team being played by the best players at the top of the game, right? So, I'm not talking about a casual club night against someone who's just picked up Pathfinders for the first time, because they are an immensely complicated team, okay? And you need so many synergies and stacks to work, etc., and they have such a huge, deep toolbox. But if you can get all those points together and work them together, then they are a team that is equipped with 4 or 5 damage across the board, loads of methods of reliability, loads of accuracy, 5-6 damage weapons where you need it, lethal weapons where you need it. They got access to grenades, they got access to Relentless. They can dig you out of cover. This team is a good team, and they have some really good abilities to be able to shut down a lot of problem teams where they need to. So do not sleep on Pathfinders. They don't get access to a lot of their synergies into the dark, which is why I think people are watching them perform poorly. And if you're taking them to a mixed tournament, you probably don't want to take that risk, right? So that's why people aren't taking them. But on open board, this team is so strong. So they're just unbelievably difficult to use. So if you're doing a long tournament, the mental drain is massive, right? Because you have to be using all these synergies all the time to make the most out of the team, and that can be really rough. Okay, next, Vet Guard. They're just a good team, right? We all know this. No changes here. They have a good toolbox, lots of bodies. Their only weakness is the fact that they are security, and if they were anything else, they would be probably insanely, like, if they'd seek and destroy, they'd be so good. So I'm happy with them, like, not having anything else. One tweak I would like to see is, like, if a spotter couldn't chain activate, that would be nice, right? So, like, if the spotter had to spend an activation to then activate the next guy, so you couldn't just do the immediate turn one alpha strike against someone in heavy cover, or the sniper shot against someone in heavy cover, etc., etc. I think that would be a better thing for the game, because everyone else, when they do that, they have to telegraph that they're going to do it, and Vetguard don't, and it's across the map, and I just find that's just, like, so strong, particularly when you have the fact that the demo mine as well is there, and that can blow through walls, etc., etc. So, like, that's a tweak that I think they just would make him just slightly better, and probably wouldn't affect the power level that much. Or you make it so the spotter only works versus light cover, but so many other things in the game now ignore heavy as well. I just think that's probably the way to do it. Breaches next up. I really like breaches, and I can't really understand why, like, Intercession got nerfed, but Pathfinders, Vetguard, and Breaches haven't been nerfed, because, like, this team is like, it's legit, right? Like, it's got loads of wounds, loads of durability, it's got access to great tac ops, it's got access to loads of reliability employees. Like, what's not to love about this team? And when you see it played at high level, like, this team is really, really strong. So yeah, like, if you're playing, yeah, like, I just don't, yeah. So I didn't really understand why this team hasn't been touched, and, like, so much of the other things that have happened around the game. So, you know, the nerf to how much, like, the minimum damage in the game, where it's gone down to 3/3 for a team that's entirely 3/3 damage basically across the board. Like, that is so good. Like, even their melee is 3/4. It's like every part of this team loves the changes to the damage mitigation, and I just don't really understand why they get to stay where they are whilst other teams drop, and that's fine. But, like, they're a great team, right? They have access to a whole bunch of strong stuff, and I can see them doing really well at tournaments. Just note the caveat of there are some particularly tough matchups ahead of them. Okay, so sneaking into A tier now, I say that like sneaking in, but, like, they've probably always been here. Hunter Clade, I think this team has potentially some of the tricks that's needed to deal with some of the problem children, right? So, like, the infiltrators being able to shut off rerolls across a huge area is so useful against some of these melee teams, and combine that with the fact that you need crits as well. Having 5 power weapons on your front line with bodies that are 10 wounds apiece is really useful, because you can 2-hit kill a beastman, and they can't 2-hit kill you back generically, which is really useful. So that's pretty cool. You can mess with their reliability. You can buff your own reliability with balance for a turn. You can do some shenanigans by, like, healing yourself to be able to then, like, get a good melee fight in again afterwards. And you've also got a good backline for gunners. If you're running into elites, you have loads of access to strong shooting. Plus, you have the Rustalk assassins with the rending blades on 4/6. So, like, you have ways to kill people effectively, and you can play the mission really well by doing forward deploys, early loots, servo skull for free mission actions, free pickups, etc., etc. And you have access to great tac ops. So they score well, they perform well, I think they do well into the current meta. You know, I think this is a strong pick. Next up is going to be Commandos, and these guys are, like, I kind of want to say that they're here because of what's going on around them. It's probably, like, the way I see it. So Commandos have the ability to obviously alpha strike quite well. And I think they're going to be the team that people see the most success into with Colts, outside of Colts, Beastmen, and Inquisition, and maybe RBTs. I'm sort of playing around with that. Because you can potentially get off, you know, a stick bomb turn 1, you can get off a dynamite turn 1, and you can, like, really soften up a lot of the enemies. And the fact that they're 4-5 damage each means that if your opponent messes up in their melee and then they don't roll what they need to roll, then you can kill them, right? And they need to inflict damage to mutate. So just a scratch means that if they try and punch you, you could potentially just a scratch it and then kill them. Or if they try and parry you out, you can parry them out and then kill them. It's like them not being able to mutate is huge, and they're really good at being able to shut that off. Also, you can like forward deploy your sniper to potentially assassinate the leader or the icon, and with the minimum damage, you don't really care because it's 2-2 anyway. So you can get a good early kill on that. You can forward deploy a rocket boy potentially to try and get a shot off if you need to, or the slasher boy. Like, there's so many ways for you to be able to try and focus on killing the right models right at the start of the game and just set the tone where you need it to be. And I think that's why they're going to perform well into those matchups. And they're fine into like other teams as well. You know, with 11 activations, they can really hang it with squads like Inquisition, etc. So that works well for them. So I think they're in a good place. You know, and I think they're going to do well into this meta. I'll be interested to see how they perform based on you know what's going on around them. Next up, I'm going to go with Illithidian Starstriders. So these guys, I might be overrating them slightly. Maybe they deserve to be a little bit further back. But again, I'm just there looking at it from a how do you try and beat these other teams, and these guys having access to some quite significant blast in the right places means you might be able to weaken people to the point in which they can't survive melee, and then they can also bully objectives quite well. So a combination of those factors means I think they're really good, and they have the tools now, and I think they're in a good place. So I think they're a strong pick. And I'm pretty happy with them being top of A tier. I can see arguments for them being behind Commandos and Hunterclade. In fact, to be honest, most of A tier you could rearrange based on the map and what your matchup is. But I think they've got good answers to a lot of the problem sets that's out there. I just don't know how reliable they are when it comes to killing your cults and your beastmen. I like the fact you have multiple access to power weapons. I like the fact that you can, reduce damage on objectives, so you maybe don't get killed by frenzy people. But yeah, I don't know. That's kind of where I'm at. Okay, so we're into Stargate tier. Now, maybe you'll think to yourself, why is this called Stargate tier? And if you are, that's because you're not watching enough Kill Team Casuals. So hurry up and get up on there and watch it, catch up with the latest episodes, because this will make much more sense. But this is the tier, right, that I think needs nerfs, right? So maybe they're just overperforming in some way or whatever it's going to be, or they're overperforming in every way, but they need some sort of tweaks made to them. So one of the things I'll caveat this with is, like, I thought previously when doing tier lists that the baseline that I would sort of set for most teams was like Intercession, and therefore all teams would be balanced around that sort of matchup. And therefore, in a way, Gelapox and Void Dancers were strong, but they weren't like crazy strong in comparison, right? So they're like, everyone acknowledges that they're good teams, but at the same time, it wasn't ridiculous. But now that Intercession has been brought down because effectively it's unfun to play against, like the same sort of, like, for new players, I'll caveat, the same applies for Void Dancers and Gelapox, right? Like, you can't play those teams as a new player against them and say that it's an easier matchup compared to playing against like Intercession, because like Void Dancers just shut off like a vast amount of the game, and Gelapox can just like absolutely swamp you and body you, and if you're not ready for it and you don't understand the playstyle, it's going to really hurt. So those two teams, I think, need adjustment, because they're just slightly overperforming in the way they should do, and I think that they are the feels bad for your opponent exists right now. If we aren't balancing the game around that, then that's fine. You can just bring in Session Squad back up. You can buff them again. But like if we are, and it's genuinely like your opponent feels that they are disadvantaged by this, then these are the two teams that I think you should hit. So the problem is, like, how do you then change these two teams without ruining them, right? And that's kind of like the problem for all of this, because Void Dancers are, again, like they're a very fragile team. So if you change their wounds characteristic, if you change their like ploys anymore, whatever it's going to be, then suddenly they just become, horrible to play as or against, and to play as, and they could just be really, really fragile. I just think so. This is kind of my my one thought. I just think that maybe it's the fact that they're just slightly too mobile. Like, just it's people thinking they're safe and them getting caught out that they're not. So maybe with Void Dancers, you just make it so that when their flip belt means that they ignore the first circle of climb and ignore the first circle of traverse. Like, they just get effectively the Rust Stalkers or the Phobos Vanguard sort of style. I think that would work, right? So like, suddenly, boom, away you go. You're now, mobile, but you're not flying over everything, and that might just help let people do stuff. It would stop some of the shenanigans of them just basically flying through doorways and stuff on ITD and just getting into your back line, and you not being able to have anything to do, like to solve that problem. So that's probably where I try and tweak them. Gelapox, I'm going to sound like a stuck record, like, and everyone's going to hate me for doing it, but like, can we just get rid of the 5-up Feel No Pain? Like, or can we like change it round? Can we put the 5-up Feel No Pain on the small guys and put the 6-up Feel No Pain on the big guys? Like, can we? Is that like doable? Because so many wounds with a 5-up Feel No Pain is just wild, and I can't really like. I would rather they sort of took that away or made it -1 and then buffed them somewhere else. Like just give them something slightly different, because, and I've seen it, like Gelapox players when they roll really poorly on their Feel No Pains and they just look destroyed because they've had their most durable model just taken down because they couldn't roll a 5-up, and vice versa. I've played against Gelapox where they've made like 70%, and you're shooting at a model that feels like it has like 60 wounds because you've done so much damage to it. So that's kind of what I think would be good. And again, like, I think that might help with the with those matchups where it's like, okay, you have this really big dude, but he's not quite like, he's durable, but he's not quite so durable, because rolling 6s is so much harder than it is to be rolling 5s and 6s, and it would make a huge difference. That's what I'd say with that. All right, so we sort of skipped over Inquisition. It needs to be addressed. Like, I actually think Inquisition are fine into your mid range and your Horde. Like, they have like a scaling reliability problem, right? So they're really good at killing singular models, and then they struggle as the model count goes up. So this team needs to be nerfed versus elites, right? Like, I think that's a fair comment. Like, being able to bring 2 melter guns, 2 plasma guns, and a melter mine, like, it's just not needed. Like, it's too much AP, and I just think a really simple fix would be something like, you aren't allowed to have more than 3 AP2 weapons on your team, and then boom, like, done. Because then you could take a multi-melter and a plasma cannon and a plasma pistol if you ran all into Inquisition. That would be legal, but you couldn't then go, you couldn't take double melter, double plasma, and a melter mine, and just tone down that EP. The other thing in the matchup versus Legionary, which I think is really gross, is you can keep doing Absolute Authority versus the same ploy, and they have so many ploys that they need to be able to use, right? So like, let's say you're playing against Tzeentch and you want to be able to remove their Foreign Vulnerable save. Like, that's fine on a turning point. Being able to do that every turning point is too much. Mutinate Flesh, every turning point, too much. So I think, like, the balance change that I'd make there, reduce how much AP they can take, and then make it so that you can't Absolute Authority the same ploy twice, right? Like, if you make it once per game, they're going to run out of like ploys because they've already got Denounce once per game. But I just think that'd be a better fix. Like, just let them go. You can turn it off, but you can't turn it off twice, and then suddenly everything becomes a little better. Like, becomes a bit of mind games. Like, do you turn it off on turning point 1? Do you turn it off on turning point 2, turning point 3, whatever it's going to be? Like, and that also applies to like reanimation protocols for Necrons. Like, do you want to stop that guy right now reanimating, or is there someone else later in the game that you think is more important? I think that would be a really good fix. Okay, the two problem children. It's Fulgur Ravagers and Chaos Cults. And like, this is different scales of problem. Like, Fulgur Ravagers are a big problem, and Cults are just even worse. But like, the problem is that let's start with Fulgurs. Fulgurs have a very simple and straightforward playstyle, right? And you can take them out of the box and you can play with them, and away you go. No major issues. And you'll be rewarded for it. The problem is that playstyle like directly ruins some other team's ability to deal with them. Like, completely ruins it. So let's say you're playing Fulgurs into Pathfinders, right? Like, there is no way that a Pathfinder can kill you before you charge them. Like, for them to get into range and shoot you, you're going to then be in charge range, and they're always going to be able to kill one of your guys for you. So, like, you don't win that matchup. And if you just play points, you just play on positions, you just move up and just sit on objectives, then you're there till the end of the turn. And there's no way like a Pathfinder player charging you and fighting you in melee is just going to die if you're frenzied, right? So, like, that team has nothing really that it can do about it. And that's replicated across many other teams in the game. So, in general, my point of being is they're slightly too easy to play, and they're very hard to counter. So they're very, very forgiving. And what my fix would be, just if you just tweak frenzy so that you, like, two options. One is you make it so that it only works on readied operatives. So it becomes like in-death atonement, right? So, like, if someone charges, fights, and just passes on an objective, you can kill them and they die. Like, that's really useful because it gives someone like a play style to counter it, right? It's like, okay, I'm already in a disadvantaged situation because I have to kill the guys that have already been. But at least if I do that, they're actually going to be removed rather than just staying around for a whole another turning point. And that then fixes the whole like objective control problem, because there is a solution. You just have to kill the ones that have already activated, and away you go. That's one option. The other option I would say is just letting people be able to shoot them. Like, so if you get a crit or 2 hits through versus a frenzy model in shooting, that would also kill them. And I think that would be the two ways that I think you could skin it. I'm happy with either. I think the better solution is actually the first. Like, it only working on readied is nice. It still gives the Fulgur player agency. It's still a really strong ability. You know, you can threat saturate turn 1 if you want to, and then go in for a really aggressive turning point 2. Because if I'm shooting guys who are readied, you're still going to get to do your thing. That's still going to be really, really strong. But what it's not going to let you do is just do like the broken, boring stuff where you just don't fight and you just pile bodies onto objectives in the midboard, and then know that your opponent can't do anything about it, and you just win on points. Like, and you combine that with recon, and you just score, right? Like, that's really, like, I think, a boring play style, and it would fix that. So that would be my solution for them. Okay, Colts. Colts. Everyone knew that Vet Guard was like one of the strongest teams because they had 14 bodies. And they gave this team 15. And like, everyone knew that the strong parts of Star Striders is that they have resiliency in their threats, because they can have a blast weapon wherever it needs to be, or they have a plasma weapon wherever it needs to be, and that sort of thing, right? So that's really inherently strong abilities. Everyone knows that, like, the ability for Galapox to make you injured in engagement range is really strong. Like, these are all super effective, strong abilities, and this team has all of them. And they have like healing on top of it, etc., etc. Now, I don't need to go into much more detail as to why this team's strong. I've already done a video on the problem with Colt. You guys can check it out. How do you fix them? All right, so the simplest way I actually thought of, like the one-line fix, is just remove 1 wound from every operative. Right, like devotees are supposed to be the worst operatives in the game. They're supposed to be like malnourished hive scum that's like obsessed with chaos. Right, make them 6 wounds. Like, just make them weak and trash, because then if they charge like an intercessor, they probably die. Right, like 3-4 damage will probably kill them. and it just removes the requirement for the intercessor to get a crit. It means that bolters are more effective at killing them. It means that, all that sort of stuff I think would be really good. That'd be my first point of call. I just think it would change the maths. Like even mutants being 6 wounds with a 5 up feel no pain is fine. But this is maybe the way to do it is like if I was to completely change the team, I would make each upgrade one better. So I'd make the feel no pains on mutants a 6 up, and then I'd make it so that your devotees have 3 attacks hitting on 4s. Your mutants have 4 attacks hitting on 4s, but they're ceaseless. And then your torments have 5 attacks hitting on 4s, but they're relentless. Like build it like that, right? So that it is generically very good to be able to get to that top level, but you're going to be very difficult to get there. And if you only have 7 wounds and a 6 up feel no pain, you're actually quite easy to be killed, right? So that would then make it really useful, or a reliable way to kill these guys. So make devotees really weak. And even arguably the icon, all that sort of stuff, make him weaker as well. So he's a bit less of a problem. And oh man, that icon, I'll talk about it in a second. But like that would be a great starting point. But as an emergency fix, just bam, -1 wound across the board would change a lot, right? I think that would make the game much better for a lot of teams trying to deal with this, and it would mean that they'd be wounded easier. It would just it'd be good. So that's one idea. The next idea is, well, let's talk about the icon. The icon needs to choose between his auras, I think. Like, it needs to be a spend an AP and one of those auras becomes active until the end of the turning point. That would be a good start. Because at the moment, like, having a Mega Flamer that's insanely powerful, having a durability buff that's really good, and having an offensive buff is just too much, right? So you can try and fix each of those, or you just make effectively each one of those 1 AP. Because then he's 2 APL, right? So he's going to have to choose, does he move and then flame someone? Does he move and damage buff? Does he move and defense buff? Like, or you try and APL buff him to make him then so he can move and do, like, so suddenly it becomes more interesting, right? Like, if you sit within 6 inches or 4 inches of the icon, he's going to super flame you. That's okay, right? Like, that's a good level of balance of, like, if you make a mistake, he's going to kill you. But him being able to move 6 inches and then do a super flamer with loads of damage against loads of people and protect all his buddies around him is just too much. So make all of those things 1 AP, and that would, I think, massively fix him as an ability. So he's going to choose if he's being defensive, offensive, or if he's doing his own work in it. I think that'd be really, really good. Okay. That rounds off the tier list. That's just my thoughts. Obviously, please let us know if you have any thoughts yourself, and if you want to disagree or agree or add comments or speculation in your own way, because it's really good to hear what other people think. This is just from my experience, but hopefully you've sort of seen where the thinking comes from and where the justification comes from, and I've tried to be helpful by giving those how I'd actually think it could be fixed, right? Like, it's very easy for me just to say, these are the teams, enjoy this and move on. But actually, like, from a sort of competitive standpoint, how do we get the game back to a good level of balance? I think that would be some good tweaks to just bring everyone back into line, and then we could see where people go from there. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. That brings us to the end of the episode. Hopefully you found something new or useful while listening, and if you did, throwing us a like would be greatly appreciated. If you want to make sure you don't miss any episodes, make sure you hit that subscribe button and click on the bell so you get notifications as soon as the next one drops. It really is the best way to help a small channel like ours. And if you can't wait and you do want early access, we have a Patreon where you get exclusive access to all our content ahead of time. As always, we'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback, so drop a comment below and we'll get right to you. Thank you so much for listening. I'm your host Ryan, this has been Turning Point Tactics, and we'll see you next week.